Learning Hilchos Melochim Berg Zayin Halacha Tezvov. Mi Isha Yori V'Achalevo. The Rambam says, when the Kohen says, who is the person who's fearful and weak of heart? Kemashmoy. It means exactly what it says. Because in the Pasuk it says he should go back home. He should not cause others to lose heart. And Kemashmoy, it means a simple explanation. She'ein b'liboy koyach la'amod b'kesher ha'mochom b'kishrei ha'mochom. He's not strong-hearted enough to fight in war. Ma'ar she'ikones b'kishrei ha'mochom yishon al mikvei Yisrael. He'll u'mashir be'Yisrael. And after someone does go into the war, he should know he has to rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he is the one who saves the person at the time of trouble. The Gazan Mishnah cites a Mishnah in Soita 44a. Rabbi Akiva says, Hayor v'achalevo means exactly what it says. He can't stand up to the fighting in war. He's a coward. Rabbi Yossi HaGodol says it means he's afraid of his sins. Rabbi Yossi says it's the widow to a Kohen Godol or Kohen Hedyot. That's somebody who has to be fearful because he did another sin. The Gemara there on 44b explains that when it comes to a sin that's rabbinical, you would go back. According to Rabbi Yossi, he would not go back. According to both of them, on the rice they would go back. The Gazan Mishnah explains that Rambam codifies halacha like Rabbi Akiva. Since in the Gemara it's brought down that Rabbi Yossi admits that if somebody who cannot wage war goes back because he's soft of heart, and it says and he should not cause his brothers to become weakened as he is. But he explains Hayor that it means fearful not of the war but of the sins. The Lechem Mishnah points out that the intent of the Gemara is Rabbi Yossi admits that he goes only when he's very fearful and he's shaking. But a fear is not strong. Just that he's weak in his makeup. Yeah, Rabbi Yossi would also agree that he doesn't go back. Only according to Rabbi Akiva you would go back. Because if Rabbi Yossi doesn't disagree with Rabbi Akiva, he only adds that even from sins, then the Gemara should have said Rabbi Yossi admits Rabbi Akiva. Why does the Gemara say only that in this he admits? That means only that a person has a great fear, and not like the case of Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi admits in totality to Rabbi Akiva. Like a Mishnah Nagoyes Maimonides bring the smag, say Moetzes Godol, the positive commandment 120. Rabbi Yossi admits to Rabbi Akiva only he adds to it like the case of Mishnah says. Nagoyes Maimonides explains that the Rambam Paskins like Rabbi Akiva, even Rabbi Yossi admits to him, as we find at the end of the Gemara, that somebody who hears the blowing of the shofars that the enemies blow, or the voice of the clashing of the shields, that when they go out to war and it causes them to be fearful, everyone admits he goes back. So Rabbi Yossi adds like the case of Mishnah. Or maybe he brings from the Sifri. Rabbi Yossi says somebody who's been 40 years old, meaning that he's already weak. Therefore they disagree in the sheet of Rabbi Yossi. According to one, Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion it has to do with sin. And according to the second one, is talking about where he has become weak of heart. Questions. Why is Rambam passing like Rabbi Akiva? It means literally. Now, Rabbi Akiva only when he disagrees with one person, but if he disagrees with two, then here Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi both disagree with him, and Halacha should not be like Rabbi Akiva. He cites the Torah's Chesed, who discusses this, and he's not bothered that Rambam codifies the Halacha like Rabbi Akiva, even though there are two Tanoim who disagree with him. Rae Maven explains that Rabbi Yossi disagree between themselves, Each one explains it differently. Therefore, it's as if Rabbi Akiva is arguing with each one separately, and therefore the halacha would be like Rabbi Akiva. And he says that this would be a bit of a chidush. Ma'aponim explains, since Rabbi Yossi is the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, he's not considered his chaver. Therefore, Rabbi Akiva only disagrees with Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And the rule comes out that when there's one of his compatriots disagrees with them, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. The Chinuch writes, Hayore refers to the sins, and not like Rabbi Akiva, which is unusual because the Chinuch and the Rambam usually are more or less of the same opinion. The Shagas Aliyah questions why the Rambam didn't pass like Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Yossi. They explained it as the sins because when it says that he's fearful, you can learn that is from the next part where it says he should not cause his fellow warriors to become weakened like him, and he doesn't answer. But he does answer according to the Halacha Mishnah that Layimas, they shouldn't cause weakening of his fellow warriors' hearts. It's talking about great fear. But somebody who's just weakened, he's afraid, I don't have strength, we don't learn from Layimas, because that's part of Yore. This halacha of somebody who's weak is in effect in our times, as the Shulchan Aruch writes in Orach Chaim 54, subheading 3. Somebody who speaks between Yishtabach to Yetzer, he has a sin, and he goes on it back from Merochei Milchama. It would mean, it seems that this is talking about even the Rabbanans. The Pri Megodim points out that the Rambam passes like Rabbi Akiva, that even a sin that's been a Torah, he doesn't go back. He says that the Rambam, Hilchos Tefillin, didn't write that if he speaks between Tefillin Shalyah, the Tefillin Sharoy, he goes back from the war, because he doesn't paskin that Yoreh means from the sins that's in his hands. The Shulchan Aruch, it doesn't discuss the laws of Mochama, use the words of the Yerushalmi. We don't have it before us. It's brought in the Torah, and Mikol Mokim Avera B'Yodei. He has a sin in his hand, and he decides the case of Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Aglili admits to Rabbi Akiva that you do go back, and he also asks the question why the Rambam doesn't pass like Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Yossi. David explains why the Rambam passes like Rabbi Akiva, even though the Gemara would seem the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, because in Kedushin 49b it's brought down that somebody who sanctifies a woman on condition that he is a righteous person, a tzaddik, afilu rosha, even if he's a very wicked, the Kedushin takes effect because maybe he thought in his heart about doing tshuva. So that, therefore, even somebody who has a sin doesn't go back from the war because maybe he thought of tshuva. This is what the Rambam writes, that after he goes into the war, he should rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who saves them. He should know that he's doing the act of war by attaching himself to Hashem. He should place his soul in his hands, should not be fearful, and somebody who's willing to fight for the sake of Hashem, give his name, his soul for that, that's for sure he did a tshuva, and he doesn't have to worry about the Aveira Shabiyodoi. He should place his soul in his hands, he should not be fearful or frightened. And it says, Bayiftach, he said before the war, I shall place my soul in my hands. He says, B'nai Ephraim, I'll go down to B'nai Amon. He shouldn't think about his wife or his children. The Chinuch adds, nor his money. I guess the Chinuch understood that some people like their money. But he should forget about them. As if he doesn't have them. He should become freed from any outside thoughts for war. Anyone who begins to think about shortcomings, cause themselves to be frightened, he transgresses on a negative commandment. Shenema says in Devarim 23, do not be fearful about Tiru, do not be frightened about Techbezu, and do not become stricken with fear about the Aratzum of Naam, do not be coward in their faces because of them. And not only does he transgress on this negative commandment, all of the blood that's spilled of Yisrael, if he flees, it will be reckoned to his neck. If he did not win, and he did not do war with all of his heart, with all of his soul, as if he caused others' blood to be spilled, because people will become frightened. As it says in Devarim 28. He should not cause his fellow soldiers' heart to be weakened like his own. We find this in the words of the prophets, Yirmiyahu 48:10. Cursed is he who does the work of Hashem, he does it falsely. And cursed is the person who will hold his sword back from blood. Everybody who wages war with his entire heart, without fear, and he wants to just sanctify the name of Hashem, it's a guarantee that he will not find himself damaged, nor will any evil come to him. Even he'll be able to build a correct house in Israel, and he will acquire this for himself and his children forever. And he'll merit the world to come. Shenema says, Ki also Yase Hashem La'adoini B'Yisnema, because God shall make for my master a true house. Ki Mechemes Hashem Adoini Nulcham, because the war of Hashem, my master, does fight. And no evil will be found with you. And the soul of my master shall be tied in to the bundle of life as Hashem Lekecha with Hashem. Abigail says it's to David that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do so because he's waging the war of Hashem. And no evil will be found in your days. That's what it says. There will be no nezek and no tegiya ro. And it's from her language, and your soul shall be bound to the soul, the life of Hashem. That's what he means, that he will get the Chayei Olam Habo. The Ridvaz and the Migdal Oiz cite that some of the words are found in the Medrash, in the Parish Shoftim and Parish Giseitze, and some of them are from the words from the Ksuvim. In the beginning of Hilchos Melochim, the Rambam writes 23 mitzvahs. The mitzvah, the 20th, is not to be fearful, go backwards while you're waging war, retreat. We say for our mitzvahs, in the negative commandment 58, he writes, we should be fearful from those who are apostates at the time of war, because as it says that the Melchoma is on the connection to Hashem. Thus, those who come to wage war contradict the belief in Hashem. We shouldn't flee from them. We have to strengthen ourselves and to stand firm against those who come to wage war. And anyone who flees, he transgresses on this negative commandment, as it says in Devarim 7:21. do not be fearful from them. And it's again double this warning in Rambam 3:22, and he doesn't mention the psukim that are mentioned here. That one should be fearful, should not be fearful or cower. And he adds, it's doubled up many times. The intent is, as it says, those who warned after the Kohen had said his words before they went to the front, and they at the front the Shotrim, those who are in charge, speak to the people and say, do not be fearful. He includes that with this you can you can affect a full belief in truth. Now, why is it mentioned many times? The Rambam explains this as they continue to state. The Ramban and Rebbe disagreeing that the words are only a promise that you will not be fearful, but there's no forbiddenness to be fearful. The Kesef Mishnah says, the Rambam explains the posuk as it says. It's a warning, and he says why the Rebbe took the posuk out from its regular understanding and wants to disagree. The Ramban brings proof, because if it's a forbiddenness, they shouldn't say it further. They should not say it brings proof. If it would be a forbiddenness rather than a promise, then they wouldn't say that he should go back, because it will cause him to say that he has sinned and will go away. He's not supposed to at that point. The Hilchos Yesodei explains that you can't say this is a promise, because how does the Kohen know to promise that he shouldn't be fearful? And furthermore, it can't be that the Torah commands you that nothing will happen, because at every Melochim they announce so, and at times you see people did fall. Therefore, it's a warning and not a promise. What the Ramban asks, why do they keep on saying it if the people are going to go back? Hilchos Yesodei answers, they did so when they go to war and they see other people are weak-hearted, then they shouldn't leave it affect them. Leif Simcha, Sefer HaMitzvahs, questions on the Ramban. Even according to Rabbi Yossi, that fearful means that he's afraid of the sins that are in his hands. He doesn't have to make it known, because he's not obligated to say why he goes back. Could be he goes back for a different reason. And he brings in the Sifri, all those who go back have to bring proof that they built a house or planted a vineyard, except for someone who's fearful of sin. According to Rabbi Kiva, that the very fearfulness is from the clamor of the shields and the fear. The Rambam cites what it says in the Yerushalmi, and he adds that even to Rabbi Yossi, you have to bring witnesses to all the sins. And thus we find that somebody goes back because of Averos that in his hands is mefarsim, he publicizes his sins, and the Ramban is correct when he says his sins will become known. He questions that if we're going to explain that fearfulness means some sins that he has, like Rabbi Yossi, that also somebody who transgresses on this negative commandment is included in that. Why does he have to add the people in charge have to add those who are fearful? Since he transgressed on a negative commandment when he was fearful, that's called fearfulness from the sins that are in his hands. Why does Ramban question on the Rambam, that even when, according to his opinion, it's difficult because the sins that are in his hands, according to Ramban, the Shiurim did not explain in order to cause them to go back. Why? And what they did say that there's a forbiddenness to be fearful. He recites the Rashbats. The Rambam said that this is a promise and not a warning. If it would be a warning, they wouldn't continue to do so. It means, according to Rabbi Akiva, that the Rambam says that Allah is according to him. Hayore means specifically fearful. You don't have to announce this after they're told, do not be fearful, and he was fearful. Then it'll become known anyway and it'll go back. So Lev Simcha explains that before they went into the war, he announced, you're going today to war, as it says in Devarim 23. And though they go to wage war against their enemies, they should be careful not to be weak of heart, because they will then transgress on what HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded them. At the time of the war, they won't be able to go backwards, to retreat. If we say to them, who is fearful should go home, because only then does he have permission to go home, not after they've gone and engaged they began to engage in war. With this we can clarify the language of the Rambam, that who is fearful means literally, and after he comes into the war itself, then he has to rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And once he begins to think and to cause himself to be frightened, only after he goes into the war, he is transgressing on this negative commandment. Do not be fearful. But the Ramban writes, if it would be a warning, they would not add to it to say he should retreat. It's not a question, because before they went into the war, they would announce they can retreat, and then he has not yet transgressed on the negative commandment. Only at the time of war, if he does become fearful, does he transgress, and he must then overcome his fear and stand and not retreat. In the Bryce and Soita Mem Dalalam and Beis 44b, it is brought down that the Racham taught us. He heard the voice of the wagons, and he went backwards. He got a fear, he goes back. And he more explains like Rabbi Akiva, that it means simply so, not like Rabbi Yosef video because of sin, but rather out of fearfulness. The Hilchos Chinuch, and according to the Rambam, he transgressed. He questions, according to Rabbi Yosef, he will go back because now he's sinning. So why is Rabbi Yosef disagreeing? If fearfulness is a sin, then Rabbi Yosef will say he'll go back. Yad Melech, the Be'ez Peretz answer that he only transgresses after they go into the war, and those who hear the wagons before they went into the war do not transgress on this transgression, on the prohibition, and they do not cite that the Hilchos Yesodei said the same thing. The Machon Nesher HaGodol questions why the Rambam left out the words that he hears the wagons and he retreated like Rabbi Akiva. The Rambam codifies our law according to Rabbi Akiva, and he answers. The Rambam explains that when he hears the voice of the wagons is only before the war, and not when he heard it within the war. He questions this. But the Hilchos Yesodei, the Yad Melech, the Be'ez Peretz, learned that must be talking about when he heard about it before the war. Be'ez Peretz adds, somebody who becomes fearful suddenly, because he's fearful of nature, he does not transgress on this prohibition, because Torah wasn't given to angels. Only somebody calls himself to be fearful, like the Rambam writes, that he thinks about his wife and his children until he becomes fearful. He places the fear into his own hearts. And he discusses if it's forbidden to be fearful, and you have to rely on Hashem, that he will save, nothing will happen to him, or he shouldn't care about his life. He should give his life for the war, the Kiddush Shemayim. That's the purpose, even if he's fearful. And he points out that you don't have to be sure that you're not going to die, because the Kohen says the reason he has to go back is lest he die. So you see, the Kohen realized that people will die in war. Thus, in war, there's always a question of death. As the Yerushalmi writes, that the Sultan always finds a time to speak against people when they are in danger. And how can he be relying on the Torah says something that's not definite? Even though the Rambam says anyone who wages war with all his heart without any fear, and his intent is for heaven, he will not be found any damage to him, nor any evil. Still, the person has to be fearful. Maybe I'm not doing it with the correct intent. As what Yaakov said, maybe the sin has caused them to be able to be punished. We find this in Brochus 4a, even though Hashem told him that he'll watch him. So we find also in Moetzes 121b that Yoav ben Menashe, who was a learned person equivalent to the majority of the Sanhedrin, because died because of the transgression that Achon did. We learn anyone who goes out to the wars of David would write a divorce to his wife, so that if he would not be found after the war, we don't know if he died, his wife would be free to marry. And we must say that the obligation is it shouldn't care about himself. He should be able to give his life for Kiddush Hashem, because war is on Yichud Hashem against those who wage war basically against Yisrael are also waging war against Hashem. But the Biras Peretz infers from you should rely on Hashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will save him. He will not die. It's a posuk. Do not be fearful of them, because God is with you. Psalm 21. It says, because Hashem, your God, goes with you to wage war against your enemies to save you. And the Mishnah adds that the nations come with the human success, and you will come with the success of God. The Lishim came with the success of Goliath, and they fell by the sword, and he fell by the sword, and so did they. And the Torah said one should rely on Hashem, because Hashem Lekechem goes with you, therefore you don't have to fear. The Biras Peretz adds, going out to the war is a suffix hakona, and therefore they go out, like David says, so many and so many shall the sword consume, that it could be people will die. Therefore, somebody who is fearful that there's a percentage that are going to die, does not transgress and do not be fearful. Because the Kohen himself says, maybe lest you die. But somebody's fearful because of the enemy, and he says we won't have victory because they're too strong, or he has fear, as it says in the posuk that the enemy says, if we'll come against you enemies that are larger than you, then he transgresses and do not be fearful, And we find this intermittent in Kisei, when you go out to war on your enemy, and you'll see horses and chariots, a large nation greater than you, do not fear them, because God is with you, who took you out from Mitzrayim. The success of war is not dependent upon the strength of the enemy, even though you have to have strategy in war. This is the Torah says to do according to the order of war. But the very success is only because of Hashem and in merit. It's just like a person has to deal with making money. That even though he has to have a strategy, there's no guarantee. But if he does so and he has success, it's from Hashem. Therefore, the Kohen says that the Philistines came with the success of Goliath, and in the end they fell with him. The Bill's parents questions that at times Chalila, we find Klal Yisrael did not win. And how the Kohen know what will be now, like the Megillah Esther said on the questions of the Rambam. How can you guarantee? If the Ramban says it's a guarantee, not always do you win. And he answers, you don't have to be fearful that from the side that you see by the enemy a large encampment, because we have merit, even their greatest warriors fell. And we have to be sure that there's nothing greater about their encampment than our small encampment regarding the danger. Just like if somebody relies on Hashem, they'll give him money. It has betochen, that's a high level. And not everybody who believes in Hashem has that trust, like the Ramban says. But he has to believe everything's in the hand of Hashem, and I have to do my part. And as much, if I do more, it doesn't mean that I'll get more, because whatever I'm supposed to get, I get from Rosh Hashanah. So too by war. According to this, if he hears the noise and he is fearful, it comes from the fact that there is a danger in the world, not that because he will not, Klal Yisrael will not succeed. Therefore, he doesn't transgress, even though he's fearful on the prohibition. He's not called that he did an avera, but that he should have to return from the war in accordance with Rabbi Yossi Aglili's position. And according to the Beres Peretz, we understand the Ramban that it's a guarantee that you will not become fearful, because even though you hear the noise that the opposition is making, because you should not reckon things according to nature. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us that that's not what's going to happen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who's going to decide things. And this is a guarantee that the large numbers of the enemy will not cause the outcome of the war to be decided. But according to the Rambam, this is difficult to say, because he writes that if he's fearful because he's thinking about his house, etc., he does transgress. And therefore the Beres Peretz says, according to the Rambam, whenever he's fearful, he does transgress, only when he causes himself, though, to become fearful. And Hashem goes before you is not a reason to tell a person not to be fearful. But in truth, there is nothing to be fearful about because of the opposition, because God goes with you, but rather we have to be fearful only if we have sins, and that could cause us to lose because we don't have the merit. Otherwise, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will cause us to win, as it will happen in the long run.